So, welcome to Wash Talk, everyone, the Carwash Podcast. I'm your host, Rich DiPaolo, and joining me today, we have Eric Wulf, CEO of International Carwash Association. Welcome to Wash Talk, Eric.
Thanks, Rich. Good to see you again, and thanks for the invite.
Good to see you as well. Yeah, just as we're recording this in late May, we're about a month removed from this exciting the car wash show that took place in late April in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm hoping you had some time to decompress and maybe reflect back on the exciting show that was. So, if you can start us off here, Eric, with your thoughts on that show. What were your three biggest takeaways from the Car Wash Show 2025?
Yeah, and thanks for making the trip, Rich. It's always good to have your team out there at the event. I think my three big things would be, number one, the flood of innovation, really technology in particular in this industry now. I mean, you look at the trade show floor and, there was a time we used to talk about car wash suppliers, right? We obviously have a very strong manufacturing presence in this industry, but now increasingly the companies that are exhibiting at trade shows are suppliers to all sorts of industries, and increasingly they're technology companies. And so just looking at the breadth and new ideas, and again, especially technology on that trade show floor, every year it seems like there is more and more of that. And by the way, also amongst our incumbents, like the old school folks, right? They're continuing to up their game. But I'm just amazed walking around the floor and just the things that catch my eye. Pretty incredible. I think that's number one. I think number two is the industry is consistently, and I felt it this year, getting smarter and smarter. There's just more information available. The people who are coming into the industry have done a lot of homework. They understand the trends. They have good ideas. They're ready to go. In conversations on the floor or in educational sessions, people are able to draw upon a lot of whether it's analysts' information or whether it's other research that comes in or from the car wash industry, just smart people. And by the way, smart people processing that information. So that's always fun. I think it makes the shows fun to go to. To be honest, I'll tell you the third one, to be candid, is like, we got to continue to up our game to make that show the best event in the industry. Last year, 13 months ago or so, was the biggest event we had ever had in terms of attendance. We were down a little bit this year, which you never like. You always ask yourself, was it the weekend? That didn't help. Is the industry in a different place, or the economy? Maybe that didn't help. But at the end of the day, we need to keep making it the best show for the industry. So we've got some good ideas, I think, in the hopper for Nashville next year, and just look forward to continuing to build the momentum.
Yeah, sounds good, and certainly do upgrade your educational sessions each and every year. It seems like I get so much out of those educational sessions, waking up early before the trade show floor, and there was no shortage of discussion on key trends that are shaping the industry. From your vantage point, Eric, this car wash industry is evolving so quickly. So what are some of those key trends that are shaping our future these days?
Yeah, it is. I mean, isn't it different than 4 or 5 years ago? I mean, it was, maybe we talked about this one time when we were last together, Rich, but it was like there was the era of capital deployment, and that's done. At least that's done as the number one focus. I mean, it was about acquisition or build and go as fast as you can. And now I think there's been some indigestion and some publicized indigestion. So we're definitely in a different phase. And I think that's for the good. I don't think it's a net bad for the industry. I think it's a net good. But so I think the themes that everyone's kind of talking about right now, I would call it and these are related, of course, but it's operations, it's people, and it's technology. So it's running the store well, it's developing people, training up people to run stores and regions. I think we're making progress. We have a long way to go as an industry with that. And then I think technology, right? Technology, whether that be site management or customer experience, But I think those three, everyone's looking for ways in which to get more efficient, to do more with the same or less, create a competitive advantage where we can. And I think, investors increasingly and sponsors understand the importance of that beyond just grow no matter what.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, how to stand out in a crowded market. And I certainly want to get into a little bit more on technology later in this industry. But you mentioned a few years ago how the concept of building fast and capital coming into the market, a lot of that, as you know, Eric, and we've talked about it over the years, is these private equity companies and these large investors coming into the market. So, in 2025, how has PE changed the industry? What is the current state of private equity thinking and confidence in this professional car wash market as we sit here today?
Well, I think, from the conversations I have, I think most of the platforms or private equity firms that are invested in the industry, they understand the industry pretty well. So some of the headlines over the last 6 months, even honestly, I would say some of the macroeconomic challenges like discretionary income and inflation and, those kind of cyclical things. I don't think that's spooking most of the investors, institutional investors. They understand the premise, they understand the operating margins, they understand that this is an industry that, I still think has nice growth potential. So I think the folks who are in feel good. That being said, I think they are more cautious with capital outlay. They are more cautious with pro formas. They are more cautious with liabilities and cash position and thinking about the balance sheet a little more than maybe folks were 5 years ago. I mean, I know there are sponsor boardrooms that are asking questions about what do some of the recent headlines mean for us? And I think, again, that's where I talk about it being a net positive for the industry. You never want there to be, no one likes challenges, right? That's like human nature. I think that can make us collectively stronger and smarter. And I think that's been happening over the last year or so. So I think from that perspective, I think, we're still in a pretty good spot. I have a little bit of concern around, let's call it traditional lending, commercial lending, the 1031 exchange, the sale leaseback market. Like, some of what's happened and might be happening could spook those folks a little bit more. I don't think it's a systemic risk, but I think, I don't think the industry is done sorting itself out just yet in terms of, and what I mean by sort out, who actually can run these stores, who can make a successful operating organization, not just a bolted together. So I think this is going to take a little more time, but I think those who are in it understand that pretty well.
Interesting. And do you see any changes at maybe like the federal level that would change people's approach to investing in this market at all? Is there some kind of like macro trend that you look at that could really maybe boost and excel growth in this industry even further? Is anything holding the industry back? Is maybe a better question, way of asking that question.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, and the economy and politics is not my long suit, but listen, it's like any business or any industry. You like to have more certainty than less, right? So you like to understand where economic policy, monetary policy is going to be, trade policy, even although we're not so susceptible to that probably. But I think more certainty is better. The current environment seems to not be of the certainty flavor. It's a little more episodic, so to speak, or reactive. And so I think that's a little bit of a challenge. I do think probably, it's likely, I think, that the president's tax policies in at least directionally in large measure are going to pass. So accelerated depreciation being extended or expanded, I think that probably is good for the industry. That's certainly been a driver of some of the growth over the last several years. So I don't know that I see anything, specific to our industry that makes us more or less susceptible to policy than other places.
All right, sounds good. I mentioned one of those early morning educational sessions at the car wash show. One that I was fortunate fortunate enough to attend was kind of the state of the industry panel that you had. Discussing these larger challenges or opportunities facing this market. One of the things I pulled out of that discussion, Eric, was the old thinking used to be get into a market, saturate it with locations, and dominate, quote unquote, dominate that area. And you mentioned some hiccups with that strategy these days with these larger chains. So what strategies are effective when looking to dominate an area? Are there any maybe key lessons that the car wash industry can learn from other retailer or service sectors in terms of, let's say, customer engagement and loyalty?
It's a good one, Rich. I don't think anything that's happened over the last couple of years has disproven that density is important. So I don't think it's that there are any retailers or platforms that their challenges are related necessarily to that being the wrong strategy. Now, how quickly they can get there and execute upon it, that might be the problem. So I still think the idea of having some density in a market makes sense. It's not a novel idea. With the caveat maybe being that I think car washing, all of our consumer research has consistently shown it is still a convenience decision. It's not a destination purchase as often, particularly exterior washing, right? So I think densification is a strategy that makes sense. That being said, I think if you still have a convenient location that can process cars and make it an easy in-out proposition for the customer, I still think you have a defendable market position. But then in terms of like, what are folks else doing? I think we talked about technology a little bit already, or I mentioned it at the show. Tech that helps you operate a site more efficiently, effectively, predictive analysis, downtime, maintenance needs. That's really interesting, but also on the customer experience side, I think where the mobile experience either enriches your drive-through because it's faster to get in, either however your car is recognized by whatever technology you choose, rewards being earned by your visits, other retails or product lines understanding that you have a car wash subscription and providing you benefits with other companies or other products your company sells. All those kind of ways to enrich the customer value of the subscription or the customer experience when they're on the lot, I think it seems like a lot of focus is going into those areas.
Over the past decade, Eric, so much attention has been paid to the conveyor segment of our industry, and rightfully so. A lot of exciting things happening in that industry, and we've talked about it a lot over the past 10 years. But what's the current state and future of the in-bay automatic and self-serve models that you can talk about here?
Yeah, it's a really good question and one that's been on my mind. In fact, a few months ago, I went to the Heartland show near Omaha, the other side of the river in Omaha, because that's always been sort of the self-serve show or one of the real self-serve oriented shows for the industry. And, I went, I hadn't been in a few years because I wanted to ask operators and see what was just happening in that segment. And, I think, listen, to be quite honest, the conveyor in particular, the express model, has really imperiled the self-service segment. And by the way, when I say self-service segment, there's a difference between 3 bays of self-serve and a store that has a couple of automatics with self-serve, and then how well those sites are executed and managed and operated, right? So strictly self-serve, I to be honest, rarely hear of those constructed any longer. When I hear about people having success with them, oftentimes it's because they might have a legacy position in the market, location, or because competition has kind of gone away. Now, the next slice, I would say, when you're thinking about rollover self-serve, that combo, or rollover in the context of a petroleum convenience site most often, I still think that's a very viable and profitable, done right model. But, even folks who are focusing on that are mindful of, it seems like the population target for the express model continues to work down a little bit. communities of 25,000, 20,000, 15,000. And so when you start getting into those smaller communities, that could put an impact on places with incumbent rollover offerings or self-serve offerings. But the rollover in particular, I think because of the throughput, because of what those still command in terms of price from the customer, because they're still the best option for petroleum stores in many cases, I think that it will remain kind of a pillar segment. I think the standalone self-serve, we're looking for some innovation maybe in that segment.
Yeah, unfortunately, I have a self-serve in my neighborhood that looks a little dank, especially compared to some of these higher end conveyor options that are out there. But you guys do a great job with the Pulse report that you put out, and you've noticed over the years a lot of folks moving away from driveway washing to automatic professional car washing. Do like the demographics have anything to do with it? We're more in a do it for me kind of era right now where baby boomers maybe have a little bit more discretionary income, so they're going to these automatic car washes, and maybe the younger generations don't really feel that need to visit a self-serve and wash their own cars. Is that playing into some of this as well?
Yeah, I think it's all of those. Gosh, you know how many times you and I reference how long we've been talking about this? I mean, it can't, we're getting older, Rich, but,
Not at-
but, but you've captured the story, right? That's the story over the last 10, 20 years, how the market has evolved. I mean, to be honest, if the other piece of it, I think, if you think about the demographics, do it for me. Yes, I want things that are fast, convenient. The quality of the express model's gotten so good. The quality of the rollover model's gotten so good at petrol sites too. But with self-serve, honestly, now what's interesting is it's challenging to find them. I mean, in suburb we're located in 25 miles west of Chicago, if you looked at my behavior, it'd be all tunnel almost, right? And if you said, Eric, I'd like you to go try a self-serve, I'm not sure where I'd go find more than one or two options. They've sort of gone away. So now in rural areas, that's different, or exurbs further out, that's different. But it's a whole bunch of things I think have come together, and the market has evolved because of that. And so that's why I think, listen, the self-serve, there's still a market for that. I like doing it myself. I don't want you touching it. I want to take an hour and a half in the bay occasionally. I just got done with deer hunting season. I need some, I'm not going to get through a tunnel. All those reasons tell me that there'll still be those sites, but I think we're ready for some innovation there.
Yeah, funny that you mentioned that, because here in Long Island, I run across a lot more standalone self-serve locations than I do in-bay automatic locations. I can't even think of one area and one location near my house that has an in-bay automatic machine. But if you go further up in New York, they're certainly prevalent there. So I know you've mentioned technology a lot already in this interview, Eric, so far. So I want to focus our attention and shift our attention towards that technology piece. Just referencing the car wash show again. You guys have that great new company pavilion area, and certainly see a lot of tech in that, as well as throughout the whole show floor. I believe I saw a robot cleaning a car at this year's show. I think we got a picture of that, and obviously technology is moving at a breakneck pace in this market. So, which technologies do you think are for real, like for real game changers, and which technologies do you feel are maybe just short-term trends?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, to some extent, all technology is short term. I mean, when you think about it, right? So, I mean, it's always outdating and replacing itself. I think if you thought about the categories and the evolution we've gone through, like, IoT was a big idea 5 years ago. Oh, and how can we get all the things in the store talking to itself and rolling up to a dashboard and knowing the status? Then you had, I mentioned a second ago, this idea of predictive analysis, where how can I expect just from data, how can I know when things might fail and then head that off to maintain uptime? You can say another part of the store experience is even the locating and siting, right? What do I know about my store? Now you can get cell phone data. You can know about your competitors. You can answer questions with some level of confidence about, am I under or overperforming, and try to, then ask yourself the reasons why. So I think there's that store tech is interesting. It seems to me that the stuff around what I'll call find your customer, attract your customer, and know your customer. And then 4, retain your customer or grow your customer. That stuff's really interesting. So, how do I reach people in my trade zone? How do I make them aware of me? How do I get them to take that right or left turn? How do I get them to subscribe or come back with regularity? I think there's so much more now, license plates and cell phone traffic. And I mean, I'm sure right now 50 people with foreign governments are listening to you and I talk every word, and they know what we're thinking and what we had for breakfast. That's just the world we live in, right? The ones and zeros are everywhere for people to tap in. So all that stuff around customer knowledge and defining customer and marketing to them and growing the relationship, every business is trying to do that. And so I think that I'm keeping an eye on that category in particular in the industry.
Interesting. All right. Well, I'd like to stick on technology, but maybe at a different angle. Maybe age us a little bit more and how long we've been talking here, Eric. But back in June 2019, I wrote my column, has the car wash button arrived? And in that column, I was referencing a 2020 Mercedes-Benz, I think it was a GLS model that came out with what was essentially a car wash button to help this car with all these sensors go through a wash without causing any trouble. And I know you said at the time, direct quote, it was a step in the right direction. So in 2025, as we sit here today, are you satisfied with the level of cooperation from auto manufacturers and the technology of newer vehicles that make visiting a car wash easier?
No.
Okay. You want to stop there?
No, of course not. I mean, it's like we're walking in concrete, and it's kind of ridiculous in this day and age that, you still find in automotive manuals, what some of the language would make you think if I go visit an automatic car wash, the whole thing is going to melt away, that the car won't work anymore. I'm being facetious a bit, right? But it's kind of ridiculous. I mean, everyone washes their car at automatic car washes now. We know that auto manufacturers design and fab in general terms around the car wash environment. It's frustrating that we haven't gotten all the way there yet on kind of doing everything that is possible to align technology and fabrication design to work in car washes. We're getting there. It's not fast enough. You also have an aging car park. So as cars are going 12, 13, 14 years old, even if we solve this today, we've probably got 15 years of some lingering issues. So, I think there's some encouraging things here and there. I think it's becoming more of a conversation. That's what we see when we interface with Society of Automotive Engineer people. But you just wish it was happening faster because it's the manuals and the guidance haven't kept up with contemporary behavior.
Now, one thing I love about these car wash shows is you get such a diverse audience of people who come and attend these shows from, we've seen more and more suits from these large investors come to the show. But this industry has always had these smaller investors, young couple. We often see them wheeling around a carriage with a baby inside of it. These are young families. These are maybe the next generation of families. When we talk about these, there's so much attention gets paid to these large chains, but they're really just a small percentage of the overall operator picture when we look at it, right? So these small investors obviously will always be a part of the car wash industry. So what advice do you have for a small investor looking to start a car wash today?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I guess part of the answer, of course, depends upon what's the definition of a small investor and what's the size of the investment, right? Or what's the type of business they want to open. I mean, at a macro, I think you could create a defensible position or opinion around, I don't know if this is the industry for a small investor, to be quite candid, right? I mean, if, let's say, for example, the best example is you're looking at the express segment and you're talking about a 5 million plus investment for a store in an industry that there is well-heeled competition that is executing densification strategies. And I would argue maybe that's not the place for a small investor. Don't take your 5 million and build one store if 5 million's all you've got. And I'm speaking in generalities, right? So, I mean, there's always someone's going to make a better mousetrap and have a new idea and be able to execute well and be successful. But I think you could, that's an opinion that's not entirely crazy. On the other hand, if you're someone who's looking to get into, let's say, a rollover self-serve combo kind of site, you found a good piece of dirt, you feel good about your market research. Listen, like we talked about at the top of this episode, it's still an industry with really good operating margins. I think it's an industry where thus far, knock on wood, we've seen pretty durable consumer demand. I mean, I don't know that I see the country going back to, I'm going to wash in my driveway anytime soon. Let's knock on wood, because I'm not cheering for that to happen, but that's good for the industry, right? So I think, smaller investor, understand, maybe a better way to look at it is what's a risk profile. How comfortable are you with the risks of the current industry? And then if small means one site, or if small means a billionaire opening one site, those are different kinds of evaluations you might do in one example.
Well, I know it's only 3 show days, but I'm sure it takes at least 362 days to plan that car wash show. So much going on with the educational events and the networking events and the trade show floor. Do you get some time to catch your breath from this 2025 show, or are you already planning for the 2026 show? And I believe that's taking place in May, early May next year in Nashville.
Yeah, Rich, we're planned out through 2030. We have contracts signed, if I'm not mistaken, and 31 and 32, I think, are on Kim Vinciguerra's desk. So we're always planning pretty far out. And looking forward to having you in Nashville, of course. I'll tell you, I'll to not ruin the headline, but I mean, it's not going to be on the weekend, but we are going to be right next to Mother's Day. Which is just the way it is. We don't get to choose when and where always we go. But, we're also planning our roadmap event will be this fall in Dallas, which we can talk about later in the year, maybe, if you'd like. We're looking forward to that program again. And, then other things that we do here around our research and our car wash manager training and the lead program keep us pretty busy.
No rest for the weary, it sounds like. So we appreciate your efforts, Eric, and we look forward to these great events that you discussed. Thank you for spending some time with me. I hope you have a great summer.
You too, Rich. See you soon.